In the beginning, there was difference, and it was good.
And you've given me 5 minutes for a decade. That's 2 years a minute. And as I just said, that sentence, 4.5 months elapsed. Mm-hmm. That, as you recall, is the way time got telescoped is when in your student summers. And I think as time telescoped, feelings really were proportionally magnified too. And certainly to an explosive point for my class. I entered Smith in the summer of 85. When we got here, in the summer of 85, we were stunned to find that despite a black associate dean who was the acting dean, our entering class contained only 4 students of color. And what we did not know was that number would be reduced by attrition to 2 for our graduating class, and that actually happened within a year. And this, I think, gave a clear and alarming message about the deficits that we needed to tackle, and tackle them we did. Among my classmates were a group of very bold, very provocative, and articulate radical activists who came of age in the aftermath of the 60s, which spawned the lesbian feminist movement, the single biggest influence on most of the most vocal student voices. I think, most of us grew up in our preteen years watching the protest stuff on TV and thinking that would be what college would be like when we got there. When we got to college, it wasn't really like that, but we tried to make graduate school like that at the very least. When we opened our readings, we saw our curriculum as unintegrated as the student body. Human behavior in the social environment seemed to have deleted the social environment, unless, of course, turn of the century Vienna was your milieu. Race was relegated to the racism course, and along with social policy, relegated to the back of the bus. As for treatment methods, my first summer casework instructor, in full-time private practice himself for a number of years, chose to teach by following one client from his private practice through the 10 weeks of casework. And the client he chose was a young adult with a very fast sports car whose father was a diplomat. And try as I might, I could not make the leap required to translate this learning to my placement at City Hospital in Cleveland. In Cleveland, they regarded my interest in, and I had an avid interest in, long-term psychoanalytic, psychodynamic psychotherapy with bemusement. And they were social workers. They revered this woman called Ann Hartman. And they knew what to do with a 2-week psychiatric or a 10-day psychiatric inpatient stay. I did not. Anyway, Ann Hartman began her tenure in our second summer as dean. And in true form, we celebrated her arrival with a protest. What more could a new dean ask for? We had a really royal protest about minority recruitment and retention. We looked around and we saw that everybody was white, and we had two students who were students of color who were continually asked to speak for their race, who were in a very difficult position. Both of them were actually on the executive committee of Student Org. And the other 2 students of color disappeared, one to eventually graduate, fortunately. And we really just felt it was part of the ethics of our profession to agitate around that this was not good for the school, it was not good for our profession. We needed to be recruiting and training minority social workers. We protested. The dean was, to our chagrin, delighted at our protest, and she invited us to restage it the next day for the college photographer. We were puzzled, but we learned our lesson. Our first systemic lesson: join with the resistance. It works very well. And the school began a very painful process with this new dean. And I would say that this process was actually, and I'm going to use the term a coming out process. And I know that I'm stealing the term from the lesbian feminists who first used it. And I guess coming out, as I would define it, is owning an identity that is either in disfavor or oppressed. And I think another identity that we embraced with Ann Hartman's coming, and the way that the school really came out was to embrace the identity of being social workers again. I'm not sure why, and I'm not really sure how, but I think that there had been some dilution over time, and we, for some period of time anyway, lost touch with our foremothers, I think, in this field. That when I feel like when I got here, I was not learning, and I did not know about Bertha Reynolds, and I didn't know about Annette Garrett, and I didn't know much about Florence Hollis, and that private practice, I think, was held up to some very high position. Back to the summer, the second summer, my class was in constant outrage, as it was the first summer. In every class, someone relentlessly hammered away at the issues, as we saw it. The issues were class, race, gender, sexual preference, and ageism. We argued with passion, conviction, and intellect. The challengers were very well read, and they knew the theory they were critiquing as well as their critique, which made it really infuriating to try to argue with them. Many arguments ensued over the interference with the learning process because of the focus on what we call the issues of difference. In the end, everyone felt very enriched by this process, and some bonds were forged across these differences that were very powerful and profound. And I was reading this to some classmates before, and they asked me to please note to you what our symbolic gesture was at graduation, and actually our symbolic gesture at skit. What you call constituencies, I think, what someone else called splinter groups, what some people call special interest groups. So we argued, and then we learned to love each other. And our symbolic gesture of acceptance at graduation was that each person carried a different species of flower. And as we processed in, we placed them in a large vase in the center of the audience, and each person added their flower in and made a very beautiful, wild flower. Another example, a very moving example of the solidarity that people wound up feeling through this process was that at Skit, the very strident lesbian, gay, bisexual alliance, their skit, actually I should say our skit, consisted of two very simple and beautiful songs. And the entire class rose in tribute to that splinter group / constituency to demonstrate the support that they felt. And the class was particularly concerned that the divisiveness over the period of time not be represented to the world as a divisiveness that was going to live on. And that was their gesture. What we really learned from what we did was that social workers are agents of social change. And we really lived that. Though it's been painful for the school, I think it's been really quite wonderful.
Your angry class is here. The four people who started off with you your first summer, that we want to say that it was an honor and a privilege to be here at the pivotal time when you came, and that we are really proud of what you've done for this school. We were a very angry class, as you know. We gave you a really hard time. And I think 201, we probably all have seen over these past 5 or 6 years that you have been a visionary, and you have moved the school in a direction that I think everybody is going to be proud of, even if they don't know it yet. And
I sat down and listened to those folks. You know, if you sit down and listen to folks, no matter how angry they are with you, and pay attention to what they're saying, you end up good friends.